Hello everyone, welcome to Interfaith Odyssey. I'm Azar Alizadeh and I'm so glad that you are watching Interfaith Odyssey, which we are always thankful is sponsored by Metropolitan Christian Council of Detroit, Windsor. More than any other time, I think we need programs like this, which really bring all us up together and shows us that really nobody is above the other one. Before we starting with the topic, let me introduce the wonderful panelists here. And they are Rabbi Dorit Edut from the Jewish community. We have Ms. Raj Shell from the Sikh, and we have Reverend Dr. Olaf Lydom from the Christian community, and Mr. John Sachs from the Baha'i community. Thank you to all of you being here. Today we are going to talk about a topic that we never talked about it, and I'm glad it's time to bring that up. And this is about spirituality of sexuality, which we know in the whole history of mankind. There are poets and literature about spirituality and sexuality. We want to know what your tradition talks about that, teach about that regarding the spirituality of sexuality. And is there any dimension that we are overlooking on this topic? And we're going to start with our good Rabbi Dorit.
Thank you. Well, Judaism begins by talking about sexuality and spirituality right in the beginning of the Torah, of the Bible, where God says to Adam and Eve, Pir'u u'revu, be fruitful and multiply. And so that sexuality, of course, was all about having children, but it was more than that. It was also considered a holy union. Today, when you do a marriage ceremony, we always talk about God being the third partner in any marriage. And sexuality is very much encouraged in Judaism, especially on the Sabbath. It's one of the honorable things to do. But there are certain limits and certain provisions and understandings around it. Sexual union, the spiritual aspect of it, is supposed to reflect, and especially the mystical people in Judaism see it that way, that the man and woman are representing also what's going on in the heavens above. So the woman is the divine presence, the Shekhinah of God, and God is God, but God has both male and female aspects, and so when men and women unite, so also God's parts are united, and that brings a wholeness and completeness to the whole world on a spiritual plane. On a more practical level, there are some of the regulations are that man are required to fulfill his wife's sexual desires. And this is part of the written document that the man gives his wife at marriage. However, a woman can refuse to have sex with her husband. He's never supposed to force himself upon her. The most important thing is the intentionality that they go into the sexual relationship with mutual respect and understanding, but that the woman is seen as a gift to man, that by having sex, they are not only bringing the divine together in the outer realms, but also helping to repair the world, that there are hurts and brokenness in other relationships, and so by their uniting, it also helps to spread that spirit of union and harmony in the rest of the world. The woman represents Leah, the fruitfulness, as well as Rachel, the one who has enticing or enthralling qualities. The only aspects really that are perhaps not dealt with or are problematic today are the aspects that what we call the inappropriate sexual relations that are listed in Leviticus, among them being relations, homosexual relations. And those are things that today it's very much being dealt with in Jewish legal and rabbinic groups that try to understand that there is something also holy in that. God doesn't make a mistake to create people this way. So what does this all mean about a sexual union between homosexuals? And that's something that we're still exploring. What does that mean?
Thank you so much. Well,
Okay, thank
we
you.
learned a lot. And we go to Olaf. You tell us about spirituality of sexuality.
Unfortunately, in contrast, Rabbi, to your sexual integrative tradition, if you will, the history of Christianity has been the opposite. Until the last several decades, unfortunately, regular Christian tradition, and this is oversimple, I know, this is complex, but has been basically antithetical to sexuality as an aspect of spirituality. And it's almost like the important parts of the person is a disembodied mind and an angelic spirit. And it's too bad we're embodied. It's too bad, especially we're sexualized bodies. When I go to Google and look up the subject of spirituality and sexuality, a couple of things strike me in the very early submissions. An article by Peter Rengel, for example, on spirituality and sexuality. He's quoted early to write, why not include God and sex in the same breath? But then he goes to tantric and yoga traditions to discuss it, not Christianity. Likewise, in that early part of the Google thing, a Walter Last, again on spirituality and sexuality, notes that Christianity is very good on the negative aspects, the no-nos. Don't dominate, don't rape, don't subjugate, don't lust. And that can be a positive thing. But again, not embracing spirituality in a positive way with sexuality. The Holy Roman Mother Church in Western Christianity in the 12th century decided to make marriage a sacrament. But one of the intents is to convert sexual desire to desire for children. As if sexual desire is an unfortunate thing, but how else do we make babies? So, okay, we'll have to kind of just put up with it. I'm being a bit extreme, but I think it is being straightforward at the same time. And then the Catholic Church also then, in the 1500s, 1563 I think it was, made Catholic countries have marriages happen in church. And then the British picked up on it a century later. And here's the rub. If Christian tradition and Christian communities, for the main part, emphasize the no-nos of human sexuality, then where do the yes-yeses go? And the yes-yeses go to culture, to the prevailing culture at the time. And sociologists emphasize that sexuality is one of the strongest social constructions to determine people's behavior, even their desires and preferences in the whole sexual area. But fortunately, this started changing in the 70s. And Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, came out with this incredibly influential book, A History of Sexuality, an introduction in 1976. And his basic point is that sexuality is not like a given construct that all human beings share alike, but it's socially constructed. And then other people also came. But a great turn happened in 1978 when James Nelson came out with his groundbreaking book, Embodiment. And he says, unlike Christian tradition has been for all of these centuries, we now need to realize that our embodiment is a gift of grace, a gift of God. And he turns the question around in saying, most of us think about this question, what does God have to say about sex? But he turns it and says, what does our sexuality say about who God is? God is a God of communion. God is a God of physical, spiritual, mental connection. And others have picked on this. The most forgotten book in the Bible is the Song of Songs. And how does the Song of Songs begin, Rabbi? Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And then the rest of the book, the woman in desire for the man extols the man's body, and the man likewise extols her body. In other words, sexual desire is spiritual. It's a beautiful thing. In the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, verse 25, it says, now the man and the woman were naked, but felt no shame. It's not as if when they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they became aware of genitalia. No, they were aware of that, as you said, right from the beginning in the image of God. There's more to say, but I hope I can inject a couple of things as we move forward. It's becoming, Christianity has now the project of integrating sexuality with spirituality, and thank God it has begun.
Thank you so much. That was lots of input. Thank you so much. Raj, share, you tell us about the spirituality of sexuality.
Thank you, Azar. First of all, it would take human beings to discuss something which is so natural that, animals, are very comfortable with their sexuality. But human beings, for some reason, there's a taboo around this subject. And maybe that's why we haven't discussed it up to now. And I'm glad we're doing that today. So there are a few things that we need to understand about the Sikh teachings. And one of them is that the householder status is superior morally and spiritually. So, celibacy is not encouraged. It's to live as a householder. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And part of that is our sexuality and the sex. And sex is considered a gift, entrusted to us by God, that allows a soul to take physical form. And it's really to be celebrated. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And in fact, in the Sikh scriptures, in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, the language of how the soul relates to God can be at times very sensual. It's described as a union between the soul and God, and it's similar to the union between a wife with her husband, where there's just ecstatic joy and just infinite pleasure. And so it's just a part of who we are. And so what Sikhism does is it embraces the primal instinct and really elevates it to the divine level. And so the union between man and woman, it's a spiritual practice that is shared between two people who are serving each other's souls.
That's nice. Say one more time.
So it's the union between man and woman is a union of serving each other's souls.
Very good.
Okay? And when we serve each other's soul, we find the experience of God within ourselves. And so finally, what it leads to are two people who lose their individual identities and actually are, the expression of one spirit in two bodies. So that's how, our sexuality, our sex is defined. But now we also need to look at the downside. So what we're talking about here is lust. So in Sikhism, there are 5 attributes that we have that we need to really guard against. And those are anger, pride, lust, greed, and attachment. So if you look at all of these, what are these? They're actually our natural tendencies taken to the extreme. So for example, if we look at greed, you know, we all like nice things. There's nothing wrong with having nice things. But the problem is when it turns to greed, when it's taken to the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So each one of these, for example, you know, it's good to love ourselves, to feel good about ourselves, to feel good about our accomplishments. But when we take it to the extreme, it becomes pride. So the same way, we like to feel sensual. And it's just a natural part of us. But when taken to the extreme, it becomes lust. So this is what we have to guard against. It's not this, you know, we're confusing, you know, the sex and the sexuality and the lust.
Mm-hmm.
And the gurus explained how you can keep that, you know, like within healthy boundaries. And part of that is to always remember God. They recommended a middle path, somewhere between self-indulgence and abstinence. So that's why the life of the householder is, you know, at the top.
Wow.
It's a top priority.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Nice.
Now we're going to go to John Sachs about spirituality of sexuality in Baha'i faith.
Well, that's a big topic, as you can tell from all that's been said so far.
Yes.
And honestly, in trying to plumb the depths of the Baha'i scriptures, I found far, far more than in a sense I kind of realized was there. So how to summarize it up? Oh my gosh, this is a task. Okay. Sexuality exists within a continuum. And that continuum has a lot to do with why we're here and what we're supposed to do. Because if we go to the heart, first, if we start with just, well, where are we in the world of the spirit? It's important to understand that the Baha'i understanding of the world of the spirit is that sex does not exist in the world of the spirit. We leave our sexuality behind. Okay? Our souls are neither male nor female. They are. So the sexuality is applied to this life and to this world, and it has a very important part to play in this life and in this world. So that's a very first start. Then, in other areas in the Baha'i faith, it makes it very clear that one of the reasons man was sent to this earth, that a purpose that man has in coming to this earth is to carry forward or create and carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. That is to say, we have a purpose in being here. Mm-hmm. And part of that purpose goes back to the idea of, as you said, Rabbi Dorit, to increase and multiply. You don't build a civilization without people to build it. And so we have this issue of sexuality, which is how we increase, we are fruitful, and we multiply. And so that is one step in a great journey. You know, we're born into this world. What are we talking about in that journey? We're born into this world. And then we're raised and we learn relationships between people as we are raised up. And then we also should be learning the role of spirituality in our lives. Very important caveat here. Nothing about the body, nothing about sexuality is intrinsically bad. In this sense, the Baha'i faith totally rejects this idea that the body and anything associated with it and any of its functions are somehow evil. They're not. They're given to us by God. Sex is good, feels good because God wants it to be that way. It's a good thing. So we build these relationships, eventually coming to courtship, marriage, and more children, the bringing about of children and rearing them up. That relationship in its best incarnation goes into eternity. We build relationships between people that last in eternity. They are not severed when we leave this earth. And it goes on to there. Like I said, it's a big topic, and so much more can be said about it. But I'll stop right there because we can come back into it in further discussion.
Thank you. Too bad that our Hindu and Buddhist are not here, because I know they have a lot to say about sexuality and spirituality. I read someplace that they sometimes sit down, husband and wife, cross each other and look at each other for a long time before they start any sex. So that would be good if we had it. And of course, we don't have our Muslim to ask him what should be is in the Islam about sexuality, because we know that some men can marry many different women, 4 women. So I wonder what that relationship would be. So to say all of this, it's hard to know that still the men have more desire than women about that, in natural way. So what do you have to say about it?
So do I understand your remark to be that men are more lust-driven than women
Yes.
are? The literature does not corroborate that view as such. That the female and male desire, psychophysical, sexual desire, operate a little bit differently. That women might be a little bit slower, and it moves to the heart. Herb Steinmetz, a Catholic thinker, interestingly said, for the man comes to love through sex. Women comes to sex through love. And so there's a convergence. A bit oversimple, but provocatively true. So, and feminist, of course, critique has said, get over this idea that the men are horny and women are not, to put it bluntly. Both men and women have that desire for connection, for intimacy, but it's energized a little differently. And if both are sensitive to each other, your beautiful language about it, to feed each other's souls, to magnify each other's worth together in one spirit, that is what sexuality is intended to do. St. Paul, in the letters, speaks about the body as being the temple of the Spirit. St. Paul is not anti-sexual, though he does say, thinking that Jesus is going to return pretty quick, he says, don't bother to get married. But if you're burning with desire, better to get married than burn, So, but it's a provisional statement in view of thinking that Jesus. So some people have interpreted that as, oh, you should never try to be married, you should be a celibate. No, And I just want to make one remark, and then I will stop. A very important book that I've used in teaching sexuality at the Graduate School of Theology and Ministry, Ecumenical Theological Seminary, by Margaret Farley, A Framework for Christian Sexual Ethics. It is a terrific book that gets into the history, the culture, the depths of it. But here are the norms for what she calls sexual justice. We need to be devotees of sexual justice. And here are the markers. Do no unjust harm. No date rape. No manipulating a drunk man or woman. Number 2, free consent of partners. Don't force. Don't rape. Number 3, mutuality of desire. You both desire to be close, to co-pleasure. 4, equality. Man is not the dominator, you pleasure me. I loved it when you said, the man is obligated to pleasure the woman, and vice versa. And Masters and Johnson have said that's what really works to make relationships bond, the pleasure bond. Number 5, mutual commitment to each other's person. Number 6, fruitfulness and social justice. One of the penetrating difficulties in the Christian church is what do we do with sex before marriage? Because traditional views have been it's only right in marriage. But when people get married and start families in their 30s or late and middle 20s, she is arguing that we need a just sexual understanding that transcends just the boundaries of marriage.
Well, I would like to add that in Judaism, it's not just about having children. That sex for its own pleasure is something that is considered absolutely well within certain boundaries, and that used to be, well, it is still so that women can sue for divorce if the husband doesn't provide her conjugal needs.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yay!
Oh, good.
it was pretty early thinking on that. But I'm kind of curious, because I know you kind of referenced before about Adam and Eve. How did that break ever occur between the sexuality and the body? That the idea of original sin, was that it that broke the? Can I ask that?
It's historically contingent. Part of it has to do with Augustine. He was a highly sexualized young man, and then he had a conversion and began to bifurcate. Sexuality is bad and my spirituality is good. That had a lot of effect. Roman, Greek, tendency to Gnosticism. I mean, it gets very technical.
Our time is up, and we could still go on with
go
that.
on and on with this.
So wonderful. That was really amazing. I'm so pleased that everybody agrees that spirituality is very important in sexuality. Anyway, thank you so much for watching us, and I hope we will have next time